Hey guys, welcome to Home Review, where I take a look at your homes and give you guys tips and tricks to make it feel a little bit more like you. This is episode 3 and we are going to be taking a look at Linda's kitchen and giving her some tips and tricks to modernize it and make it feel a little bit more like home. So Linda says this is a house we are about to buy and we have very little funds for renovations. I want to work with the space and keep the original character but update it a little so we are out of the 70s. I love mid-century modern design and a bit of colour. Can you show us small tweaks that'll make this feel like home? So taking a look at this home, there certainly seems to be a lot of character and it definitely does not look like it's been touched since the 70s. But I do think it's got really good bones and I reckon we can make this space feel a little bit more updated without actually doing too much to it. And this is something I personally love about mid-century design, is that you don't really need to do too much to it to make it feel fresh and modern again. So we've got some really interesting tiles that are kind of like a yellowy olivey green, which honestly we've had green come in quite a lot in the last couple of years. Not necessarily this type of green, but I do think it can definitely work in the space and I don't think we need to touch this. So the reference images that Linda has given us certainly suggest that she's very into the mid-century modern design, but certainly with more of a contemporary flair. We see some very similar aspects to it with the timber tones and with some of the green tiles. So we are definitely on the same path for creating something that she will actually really like without having to completely gut this kitchen. And since she's got such a tight budget, the things that I'm actually going to be suggesting can be done in a rental space as well. So the first thing that we're going to do is change out the doorknobs. This is probably going to be one of the easiest things that we can do that won't change too much of the space but give it a little bit more of an updated feel. So I've gone with these really nice brass ones that definitely do still have that 70s sort of theme but do feel a little bit more modern, a little bit more updated, but they are a little bit on the pricier side in comparison to something that you may find on Amazon. So definitely shop around, find something that's suited to you, but try and aim for something that definitely has that mid-century flair. And just to make things easier for yourself, opt for a knob instead of something else, because otherwise you'll be doing additional drill holes in the cabinets. And if you want to keep those cabinets, it's best to try and minimize how many drill holes you do in the space. Next up, we are going to try and cover up that flooring. You could go with peel and stick, but this time around I've just decided to go with a nice rug that's a similar sort of green tone to the tile backsplash. Now this definitely covers up the very busy pattern that we've got going, but it still allows for some of it to show through and so it can still continue to talk to the cabinet doors. So even though we're not getting rid of it, we're definitely just reducing the amount of pattern, so hopefully it doesn't feel as busy and as dated. So this rug is from Ruggable, and personally I really like this brand because it is a washable rug brand. I know there's a few of them out there these days, but this is the one that I found. Yes, rugs are definitely more expensive, but to have the option to wash the rug is certainly an added bonus for something that is high traffic and high spillage like a kitchen. No matter whether you have kids or dogs or you're just a messy cook like myself, something like this can certainly work. But if you want to opt for something cheaper, you can certainly go on Facebook Marketplace or somewhere else that's got cheaper rugs, and you may just have a little bit more trouble keeping it long term. But that's where you can balance out the costs and see if it's worth it for you or not. You could also use peel and stick here as well, but I personally wouldn't, because taking away all of that color might end up making the place feel stark. Yes, there's a lot of pattern to it, which is probably why I would opt for a rug more, just to cover it up a little bit and just minimize how much of that busyness that comes through to the space. The next thing that we want to do is create more consistent countertops. Now, in one of those pictures, she did show a picture that had quite a dark granite countertop, so I thought we'd replicate that here. Now, I'm not a huge fan of peel and stick, but the countertops that you have aren't really something that you're going to want to save in the future, so I'm not opposed to using something like this that is temporary, that may damage it in the long term. Not saying that it will, I'm always just fearful that it might. But this grey is certainly going to modernize the space without making it feel too stark and too different to the original space as well. Obviously the greys are very, very in for a more modern sort of look, and we don't really want to take away from all of that warmth that we have in the space, but we do want to try and update it, and this particular color will definitely do that. If we were to go with something like white, it'll end up making the rest of the space feel very yellow and very orange. So I'm trying to steer clear from adding in any unnecessary whites that will end up making the space feel dirty. And a grey is a great way for kind of avoiding that. Now, my next suggestion technically isn't in the kitchen, but it is going to make the space feel a little bit more homey, and that's adding in a curtain and curtain rod. So I would probably recommend just going with something that's, you know, simple, white, maybe slightly off-white. You could certainly go with a color as well. You could certainly go with a sage green if you wanted to kind of continue this green palette that we've got going. I've just gone ahead and gone with those really light white sheers. They're very transitional. They can go with kind of any space. And because it's just something that's sheer, it doesn't feel too invasive on the space, but it definitely makes it feel softer and a little bit more lived in. So the curtain rod I actually found through Kmart, and then the curtains themselves I found through IKEA. And these are pretty cheap. They're very affordable, but this is certainly something that you could add in later. You could do the same on the actual windows above the sink, but personally, I'm not a huge fan of having kitchen sink curtains. Just, I don't know, personal preference for me. But if you do have a lot of light coming in, you could certainly put one in there as well. And the last thing that I want to add into the space, which is pretty consistent with the reference images and also just adds a lot of personality and life back into the space, is hanging planters. Now, these planters I actually found on Temu. Personally, I am not someone that shops on there because I am a little bit cautious about it, but they are very, very cheap. So it's totally up to you. You can certainly go looking online. You can look at Bunnings, Lowe's, wherever you are in the world. There are plenty of hanging planters everywhere. But if you're wanting to be most cost effective, sites like this certainly do have the best prices. And I opted for gold and wicker because the gold would go with the brass that is on the cabinets, and then the wicker goes with the timber. So it all ties in together. You could also do other colors as well. So you could probably go with a olive green, or you can maybe go with more of that gray granite color to pair in with the countertops. But I try and opt for a color that's already in the space. So I wouldn't really recommend a full black because it'll probably be too stark for the space itself. So that's what I would recommend for Linda, because this is a pretty cheap makeover. You probably won't be spending much more than, let's say, $500 to really get everything here and get relatively good quality items as well. You can actually probably go for quite cheaper versions. You could definitely go with peel and stick for the flooring instead of having the rug. Usually rugs are a little bit more expensive, so opt for whatever works for you and your budget. But if you have a really tight budget, the key things that I would recommend changing first is probably those brass doorknobs, and then maybe doing the planters first and then seeing how you go. Then probably doing the rug, and then the countertops probably last. The reason I'd recommend it this way is because the brass knobs are probably going to create the biggest difference to making it feel just a little bit more updated, aside from the countertops. But yeah, that's what I'd recommend for Linda. Thank you so much for going ahead and using my home review services. If you would like to be a part of home review, the link will be in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on our next design adventure.